We are at the home of Charles and Lucile Herbert on Rudisill Road in the northwest part of Tucson. Charles and Lucile Herbert were two young people who met on the East Coast and wanted to get out of there. And they worked for Fox Movie Town starting in 1926, the year they married, went all over the world, and then in the late 30s settled in Tucson. They decided that it was a great place, the sunshine was wonderful, and started making these little films, 10-minute films about the borderlands and the Southwest and different stories of interest.
Here's an unusual saguaro, or giant cacti, a freak. It's like a cauliflower. And another, the only one of its kind known. This is called a watermelon cactus. Why it grew that way, no one knows.
From 36 to 76, they worked in still photography, moving image, aerial photography. They used to call him a one-man chamber of commerce. And he kind of was. He wanted to promote everything possible about the Southwest. And it wasn't so much to get rich as it was just to share this amazing region with the rest of the world.
And now we drop down to the capital city of Hermosillo, the hub around which the development of Sonora revolves. Here is the famous old Palacio, our seat of government.
And they loved people. One of the things that you find in the archive is that Lucile just had a real touch for making friends. And Herb even said in an interview they did with Arizona Highways in the early 70s that thank goodness Lucile was along because she could talk to anybody, she could make friends. One of the pieces that caught his eye very early on was down at Fort Huachuca, where, of course, there were the Buffalo Soldiers who had been there since after the Civil War, and they discovered that there was this last group of Apache scouts who were working on post and living on post. So already that was a formula for pretty interesting intercultural stories and photography. And it's not that they didn't capitalize on the sort of Wild West and the Indians, but their work was much more sensitive about depicting people.
South to Sonora, down Mexico way. Yes, it's true. There is an amazing change going on down here, but you have to see it to believe it.
It's surprisingly forward-looking, and I was braced for, all of the cliches and the stereotypes. And what's interesting about the Herberts' work and why I think it's important to know about is that they actually talked to the people who had names and were allowed to look directly into the camera and speak for themselves. Some of them sort of crusty old cowboys, and some of them native scouts who were enrolled soldiers in the army, and people moving a giant saguaro.
Like this, with a giant crane.
From one part of the desert to a very posh mansion in the foothills.
Somebody's going to take a snapshot. This is something to remember.
They went around and put a human face on the reality of the Southwest rather than just kind of reformulating those cliches over and over. It is a time capsule in a way. It does show us a period before the Sunbelt boom, when we were right on the brink of that. But Tucson was still a relatively small town. The Southwest hadn't been exploited. There weren't subdivisions everywhere. Water was a problem, but not the problem that it is now. So it's really a sort of glimpse back through history to see what life was like before we became the megalopolis of the Southwest that we live in today.